On a
You can
brisk
give me
autumn
30
morning
years.
in
That's
downtown
fine.
Chicago, the calm atmosphere of the Cook County Courthouse was abruptly disrupted by the arrival of Marcus Taylor, a 29-year-old man already well known to the local justice system. Marcus, whose name had surfaced repeatedly in connection with a string of violent offenses, was this day facing new and serious allegations, not just for his prior crimes, but for a calculated campaign of witness intimidation that threatened to undermine the very foundation of the trial against him. The courtroom buzzed with a palpable tension as the judge called the session to order. Marcus sat in the defendant's chair, his expression unreadable, while prosecutors laid out the charges that had been added to his docket. Witness intimidation, a crime that struck at the heart of the judicial process, was not a mere footnote in this case. It was a deliberate effort to obstruct justice through fear and coercion. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. The prosecution began by recounting the grim reality faced by those who dared to step forward against Marcus. Over the past several months, multiple witnesses who had agreed to testify about his involvement in serious criminal activities had been targeted. Threatening phone calls, unannounced visits to their homes, and veiled warnings were just some of the tactics employed to silence them. The courtroom, usually a place of reasoned debate and evidence, now echoed with the gravity of a man accused not only of violent acts, but of trying to intimidate those who sought to hold him accountable. Marcus's case was emblematic of a larger issue plaguing urban centers across the country, where witness intimidation not only jeopardizes individual cases, but erodes public trust in the legal system. Prosecutors emphasized that the right to a fair trial depended on witnesses' ability to testify without fear of retaliation. The charges against Marcus reflected the seriousness with which the court intended to confront such offenses. As the hearing progressed, the atmosphere grew heavier. The prosecution detailed several incidents where witnesses reported receiving explicit threats. One woman, a key eyewitness, had described waking up to an anonymous message warning her to keep quiet or face the consequences. Another man recounted how Marcus had appeared outside his workplace, sending a clear message without uttering a word. These accounts painted a chilling picture of a defendant who was not content to simply face his charges, but was actively working to undermine the pursuit of justice. The judge, a seasoned jurist with decades of experience, listened intently. At one point, he addressed Marcus directly, emphasizing the court's intolerance for any attempts to interfere with witnesses. The integrity of these proceedings depends on the safety and freedom of those who come forward, he stated firmly. Any effort to intimidate or coerce will be met with the full weight of the law. Outside the courtroom, the ripple effects of Marcus's alleged intimidation were already being felt. Community members expressed frustration and fear, aware that the ability to testify without intimidation was crucial to maintaining law and order. Local advocacy groups for victims' rights had begun organizing efforts to provide support and protection for witnesses, recognizing the critical role they played in the justice system's function. While Marcus remained silent during the hearing, his prior reputation colored the proceedings. Known for his volatile temper and several prior convictions, he had long been viewed by law enforcement as a dangerous figure. However, the new charges signaled a shift. No longer was Marcus merely a defendant facing accusations of violent crimes. He now stood accused of actively undermining the judicial process itself. The courtroom also heard from the lead detective on the case, who described the careful and methodical investigation that uncovered the extent of Marcus's intimidation campaign. Through wiretaps, surveillance, and witness interviews, investigators had pieced together a disturbing narrative of coercion and fear. The detective's testimony underscored the challenges law enforcement faced in protecting witnesses who often lived in the same neighborhoods as the accused and feared retaliation. The day's proceedings closed with the judge setting a trial date that would encompass both the original charges and the newly added intimidation counts. The decision sent a clear message that the court intended to address these offenses comprehensively, holding Marcus accountable not only for his alleged crimes, but also for the efforts to silence those who sought justice. As the courtroom emptied, the stark reality of the situation settled over those involved. Witness intimidation was more than a legal violation. It was a threat to the very idea of justice. Marcus Taylor's case was now at the forefront of this critical battle, embodying the struggle between fear and courage, silence and truth. Though the trial was still months away, the early proceedings had already exposed the high stakes involved. For the witnesses who had bravely come forward, the fight was far from over. For Marcus, the added charges presented a new and formidable challenge, one that could significantly extend his time behind bars if proven. And for the community, the case served as a sobering reminder of the ongoing efforts needed to protect those who dared to speak out. In the sterile confines of the courthouse, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights and cold marble surfaces, the story of Marcus Taylor's witness intimidation unfolded as a stark testament to the complexities of justice in an environment often shadowed by fear. It was the beginning of a legal battle that would test the resolve of all involved. The prosecution determined to uphold the law, the defense poised to challenge the charges, and the witnesses, whose courage would be essential in the pursuit of truth. Behind the cold walls of the Cook County Jail, Marcus Taylor's story was more than just a series of charges. It was a portrait of a man shaped by hardship, conflict, and a relentless struggle against circumstances that had defined his life long before he ever stood accused in a courtroom. To understand the gravity of the witness intimidation charges now facing him, it was essential to look back at the turbulent path that had brought him to this point. Born and raised in one of Chicago's most economically challenged neighborhoods, Marcus's early years were marked by instability and exposure to violence. His mother, a single parent juggling multiple jobs, struggled to provide a stable home environment. The neighborhood itself was a battleground, with gangs and crime casting shadows over daily life. From a young age, Marcus learned to navigate a world where survival often required toughness and vigilance. School was a difficult terrain for Marcus. Teachers recall a boy who was bright but frequently disruptive, often absent due to family issues or conflicts on the streets. Early encounters with the law began in his teenage years, starting with minor offenses, petty theft, vandalism, and truancy, but escalating steadily. By the time Marcus was 18, he had already accumulated a juvenile record punctuated by stints in detention centers and probation. Friends and neighbors described him as someone caught in a cycle he struggled to escape. Marcus wasn't born bad, said a childhood friend who wished to remain anonymous. He was just trapped in a system that didn't give him many chances. The streets raised him as much as his family did. This sentiment was echoed by social workers who had tried to intervene during his adolescence, noting that Marcus exhibited signs of trauma and anger, but also a desire to change. Yet, the pressures of his environment and the allure of quick money through illicit activities proved difficult to resist. By his early 20s, Marcus was deeply entangled in a network of criminal operations that included drug distribution and violent enforcement. His reputation within these circles was one of a man who could be ruthless when provoked, but also strategic and cautious when it served his interests. Prior arrests painted a picture of escalating violence. Charges ranged from assault to armed robbery, with several convictions leading to prison time. Each release seemed to bring Marcus back to the same neighborhood, the same influences, and the same cycles of crime. Attempts at legitimate employment were sporadic and short-lived, hindered by his criminal record and the stigma attached to it. Family members described a complicated figure, loving and protective of those close to him, yet quick to anger and prone to making decisions that led to his downfall. His younger sister, who had distanced herself from his lifestyle, spoke of a brother torn between the desire to provide for his family and the pull of a criminal world that promised fast rewards but demanded loyalty and violence. It was within this context that the events leading to the witness intimidation charges unfolded. Marcus's previous encounters with law enforcement had made him wary of cooperating with authorities, and his distrust of the system was well known in his community. Friends recalled his frequent warnings about snitches and the consequences of crossing certain lines, a mindset cultivated over years of living in an environment where silence was often a means of survival. The criminal case that brought Marcus under intense scrutiny involved allegations of armed robbery and assault, charges tied to a violent incident at a local convenience store. Several witnesses had come forward, identifying Marcus as one of the assailants. For Marcus, the stakes were high. A conviction could mean years behind bars, severing ties to his family and community. According to investigators, Marcus's response to the mounting legal pressure was to attempt to intimidate those who could testify against him. This was not a spontaneous act. Rather, it appeared to be a calculated effort born from a lifetime of learned behavior and a deep-seated fear of losing control. The tactics employed reflected a man who understood the power of fear and was willing to use it to protect himself. Law enforcement officials described Marcus as someone who operated with a mix of aggression and cunning. His background in navigating the street-level power dynamics translated into a willingness to confront threats head-on, including those posed by the judicial system. The intimidation campaign against witnesses was seen as an extension of the control he sought to maintain in all aspects of his life. Psychologists familiar with Marcus's case suggested that his actions were influenced by a complex interplay of factors: environmental stressors, cognitive patterns shaped by trauma, and a survival instinct honed in a hostile environment. They noted that while these factors did not excuse his behavior, they provided critical insight into the motivations behind his attempts to silence witnesses. Community leaders expressed a mixture of concern and frustration. On one hand, they recognized the systemic issues that contributed to Marcus's path: poverty, lack of educational opportunities, and community disinvestment. On the other, they condemned the use of violence and intimidation as destructive forces that perpetuated cycles of crime and fear. Efforts to intervene in Marcus's life before his latest charges had been sporadic and largely unsuccessful. Social programs aimed at rehabilitation and reintegration struggled against the backdrop of a community grappling with high crime rates and limited resources. Marcus's story highlighted the challenges faced by those attempting to break free from a life of crime when surrounded by persistent adversity. Amidst all this, Marcus remained a figure shrouded in contradictions. To some, he was a product of his environment, a man shaped by hardship and circumstance. To others, he was a threat who chose violence and intimidation as tools to evade accountability. The courtroom would soon have to grapple with these complexities as the case against him moved forward. As the legal proceedings prepared to delve deeper into the charges, understanding Marcus's background became essential for both prosecution and defense. His history was not just a backdrop, but a critical element that would influence the narrative of the trial. The question looming over the case was whether Marcus's actions were the result of impulsive desperation or calculated strategy informed by years of experience in a world where power was maintained through fear. Within the walls of the courthouse, Attorneys prepared to present their arguments, armed with the details of Marcus's past and the evidence of his recent conduct. The story of his upbringing and prior offenses would be scrutinized, debated, and weighed against the testimonies of those who had been intimidated. For Marcus, the courtroom was not just a place of judgment, but a stage where the complexity of his life and choices would be laid bare. Outside, the community watched closely, aware that the outcome of this case could have far-reaching implications. It was a story that resonated beyond the individual, a reflection of the struggles faced by many caught between the demands of survival and the pursuit of justice. Marcus Taylor's background was a window into these broader issues, setting the stage for a legal battle that would test the limits of the justice system's ability to navigate the tangled realities of crime, punishment, and redemption. The courtroom was no stranger to tension, but the revelations about Marcus Taylor's methods of intimidation introduced a new, unsettling dimension to the case. As the prosecution laid out the evidence, it became clear that Marcus had employed a range of calculated tactics designed to silence those who dared to testify against him. These were not isolated incidents born of panic or desperation. Rather, they were deliberate acts of coercion, orchestrated with a chilling level of intent. The first witnesses to come forward described a pattern of threats delivered through multiple channels. Phone calls were the most common, often made from untraceable numbers or using voice-altering technology to mask the caller's identity. Recipients recounted hearing ominous warnings during late-night calls, veiled threats that warned of consequences should they proceed with their testimonies. "Keep your mouth shut," one witness recalled being told, the voice cold and menacing on the other end of the line. But phone calls were merely the beginning. Marcus's intimidation extended far beyond the realm of the anonymous. Several witnesses reported unexpected visits at their homes or places of work, moments that sent ripples of fear through their daily lives. One woman recounted returning home from a grocery run to find a note pinned to her door, its message simple yet unmistakable. "We're watching. Don't talk." Another described a shadowy figure loitering near her child's school, a silent reminder that silence was expected. These in-person confrontations were often subtle, designed to instill fear without initiating open conflict. The presence of a known associate of Marcus nearby, the sudden appearance of a vehicle parked outside a house for extended periods, or whispered warnings passed through mutual acquaintances all contributed to a climate of intimidation. The psychological weight of these tactics was profound, affecting not only the witnesses but their families and communities. The prosecution's case was bolstered by tangible evidence collected during an intensive investigation. Law enforcement officials presented recordings of threatening phone calls, some caught via court-approved wiretaps, and others voluntarily recorded by the witnesses themselves. In these recordings, Marcus's voice alternated between calm persuasion and outright menace, demonstrating a deliberate effort to manipulate and frighten. Surveillance footage also played a critical role. Cameras near the homes and workplaces of key witnesses captured individuals linked to Marcus's circle making repeated appearances, often coinciding with significant moments in the case's timeline. This visual proof corroborated the testimonies, reinforcing the narrative of a sustained campaign to undermine the judicial process. One particularly chilling incident involved a witness who reported receiving a package at her doorstep containing nothing but a single bullet and a note reading, "Think carefully about your choices." Though the prosecution was unable to conclusively link Marcus to this act, it served as a stark example of the type of fear and intimidation that permeated the case. The witnesses themselves bore the emotional scars of these experiences. Many spoke of sleepless nights, anxiety, and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. Some recounted how the intimidation extended into their social circles, with friends and family members discouraging them from testifying out of fear for their safety. The prosecution emphasized the courage required to come forward despite these threats, framing their bravery as essential to the pursuit of justice. Defense attorneys, while acknowledging the fears of the witnesses, sought to challenge the extent and credibility of the intimidation claims. They argued that some of the alleged threats were exaggerated or misinterpreted, attributing certain incidents to coincidence or unrelated individuals. Their strategy aimed to cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that Marcus's actions were not as calculated or widespread as presented. However, the weight of the evidence made these arguments difficult to sustain. The consistency of witness accounts, supported by recorded calls and surveillance, painted a cohesive picture. Prosecutors highlighted the timing of the intimidation efforts, which often coincided with critical junctures in the case, such as upcoming court dates or scheduled depositions. This synchronization suggested a tactical approach designed to disrupt the legal process. The courtroom atmosphere grew increasingly charged as witnesses took the stand to recount their experiences. Some spoke with trembling voices, their testimony punctuated by moments of visible distress. Others displayed steely resolve, determined to stand firm despite the risks. Their accounts provided a human face to the abstract concept of witness intimidation, illustrating its tangible impact on individuals caught in the crossfire. Expert testimony further illuminated the issue. Psychologists specializing in trauma and coercion explained how intimidation tactics function to erode a witness's confidence and willingness to testify. They described the psychological mechanisms at play: fear, isolation, and the threat of harm, which combine to create an environment where silence often feels like the only safe option. This expert insight underscored the seriousness of Marcus's alleged actions and their broader implications for the justice system. Law enforcement officials also detailed the challenges faced in protecting witnesses. Despite efforts to offer support and security, the pervasive influence of Marcus and his associates within the community complicated these measures. The close-knit nature of the neighborhoods involved meant that witnesses often encountered their intimidators in everyday settings, blurring the lines between public safety and personal fear. As the trial unfolded, the prosecution's narrative was clear. Marcus Taylor had engaged in a methodical campaign of threats, coercion, and psychological warfare aimed at disrupting the pursuit of justice. These tactics were not the actions of a desperate man caught in a moment of weakness, but rather the calculated maneuvers of someone intent on preserving his freedom at any cost. The defense countered by painting a different portrait: one of a man misunderstood, caught in a system that sought to vilify him, with witnesses whose fears may have been amplified by stress and external pressures. Yet, the mounting evidence and the compelling testimonies of those targeted made it increasingly difficult to dismiss the charges as mere allegations. Throughout the proceedings, the courtroom became a battleground where the intangible forces of fear and intimidation were laid bare. The testimony revealed how Marcus's actions rippled beyond the immediate victims, impacting families, communities, and the very fabric of the justice system. The case served as a stark reminder of the lengths to which some would go to evade accountability and the profound consequences of such actions. In the shadows of the courthouse, advocates for witness protection renewed calls for stronger measures, citing cases like Marcus's as evidence of the urgent need for enhanced security and support. They emphasized that safeguarding witnesses was not only a matter of individual safety, but a cornerstone of a functioning legal system. As the trial progressed, it became evident that the story of Marcus Taylor's intimidation campaign was more than a side note to his criminal charges. It was a central element of the case, one that demanded careful scrutiny and a firm response. The tactics he allegedly employed had shaken the foundations of the court's ability to administer justice fairly and without fear. The unfolding drama served as a powerful illustration of the challenges faced when confronting witness intimidation, a crime that operates in the shadows, preying on vulnerability and threatening the pursuit of truth. Marcus's case would test the resolve of the legal system to stand firm against such tactics and uphold the principle that no one, regardless of reputation or influence, could subvert justice through fear. The fear that gripped the witnesses in Marcus Taylor's case was palpable, a silent force that stretched far beyond the confines of the courtroom. For those called upon to testify, the decision to speak out was fraught with danger and uncertainty, a choice that carried immense personal risk. Their reactions to the intimidation campaign revealed the profound psychological toll that such threats exacted, as well as the courage required to confront the looming shadow of retaliation. Among the witnesses was Angela Martinez, a young mother whose testimony was pivotal to the prosecution's case. Angela had witnessed the armed robbery linked to Marcus and had initially agreed to cooperate fully with law enforcement. However, following a series of threatening phone calls and a disturbing visit to her home, where a stranger loitered conspicuously nearby, Angela's resolve faltered. "I was scared for my kids," she recounted in a quiet voice during a pretrial hearing. "I didn't know if these people would come after me or my family." Angela's experience was echoed by many others. Some described feeling isolated, as friends and relatives urged them to reconsider their involvement, fearing the consequences of crossing Marcus and his associates. The social pressure was immense, creating a web of silence that prosecutors struggled to penetrate. "It's not just about the threats themselves," explained one witness. "It's the way it changes your whole world. Suddenly, you're looking over your shoulder everywhere you go." Despite the fear, a handful of witnesses made the difficult choice to stand firm. Their decision was often motivated by a deep sense of justice or a desire to protect their community from further harm. For these individuals, testifying was an act of defiance against intimidation, a statement that the pursuit of truth could not be silenced by threats. Yet the process was far from easy. Many witnesses experienced anxiety attacks, insomnia, and heightened stress in the lead-up to their court appearances. Some sought counseling or protective measures, while others relocated temporarily to avoid potential confrontations. The psychological burden was compounded by the knowledge that the intimidation they faced was not an isolated incident, but part of a sustained campaign. One witness, a local shop owner who had seen Marcus at the scene of the crime, described the dilemma vividly. "Every day, I wondered if someone was watching me, waiting for a moment to make me pay for talking," he said. "But if no one speaks up, then people like him keep doing what they want, and nobody is safe." The decision to report the threats to authorities was itself an act of bravery. Many witnesses initially hesitated, fearing that involving law enforcement would only escalate the situation. Some worried about retaliation if their cooperation became known within their neighborhoods. Still, as the intimidation persisted, several took the crucial step of informing the police, providing recorded evidence, and agreeing to testify despite the risks. Law enforcement agencies recognized the delicate balance required to support these witnesses. Officers assigned to witness protection worked tirelessly to establish trust, offering resources ranging from secure communication channels to physical escorts during court appearances. However, the scale of the intimidation campaign stretched these resources thin, revealing gaps in the system's ability to safeguard those most vulnerable. Community organizations also played a vital role. Victim advocacy groups provided emotional support, legal guidance, and practical assistance to witnesses navigating the daunting process. Volunteers accompanied witnesses to court, helped with relocation efforts, and connected them with counseling services. Their work underscored the importance of a network of support in combating the isolating effects of intimidation. But even with these measures, the psychological impact lingered. Witnesses spoke candidly about the lingering fear that would not dissipate with the conclusion of the trial. For many, the ordeal left scars that extended beyond legal proceedings, a constant reminder of the dangers inherent in standing up against violence and coercion. The prosecution highlighted these human stories during the trial, seeking to convey the broader implications of Marcus's alleged intimidation. By silencing witnesses, prosecutors argued Marcus was not just obstructing justice in his own case, but perpetuating a culture of fear that undermined community safety and trust in the legal system. The courtroom became a venue where witnesses' struggles were given voice, their testimonies serving as both evidence and testament to their resilience. Some recounted moments of doubt and despair, only to find strength through solidarity and the determination to see justice served. Their courage was a counterpoint to the intimidation tactics, a reminder that truth could endure despite efforts to suppress it. Defense attorneys acknowledged the witnesses' fears, but questioned the reliability of their accounts under duress. They argued that some witnesses might have been influenced by external pressures or misinterpreted events due to stress. The defense sought to portray the fears as understandable but exaggerated, attempting to erode the prosecution's narrative of a coordinated intimidation campaign. However, the consistency of witness testimonies and the corroborating evidence presented by the prosecution made these challenges difficult to sustain. The jury was confronted not only with factual accounts, but with the emotional weight carried by those who had chosen to speak out. This dynamic added a layer of complexity to the trial, illustrating the human cost of intimidation alongside its legal ramifications. Outside the courtroom, the community grappled with the broader implications of the case. The willingness of witnesses to come forward despite threats was seen as a beacon of hope amid a landscape often marred by silence. Local leaders called for enhanced protections and greater investment in programs designed to support victims and witnesses alike. The case also sparked conversations about the systemic barriers faced by witnesses in high-crime areas. Fear of retaliation, distrust of law enforcement, and socioeconomic challenges all contributed to a climate where intimidation could flourish. Advocates stressed the need for comprehensive strategies that address these underlying issues, emphasizing prevention alongside protection. Within the justice system, Marcus Taylor's case underscored the critical role that witnesses play in holding offenders accountable. Their decision to testify was not merely a procedural necessity, but a courageous stand against fear and oppression. Recognizing this, the court took steps to prioritize witness security, including anonymous testimony options and coordinated protection plans. As the trial moved forward, the stories of those targeted by Marcus's threats remained central. Their experiences illuminated the profound challenges faced by individuals caught between the demands of truth and the instinct for self-preservation. Each testimony was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of intimidation. The narrative unfolding in the courtroom was one of conflict between silence and speech, fear and courage, oppression and justice. For the witnesses, the battle was deeply personal, involving not only the legal stakes of the trial, but the safety and well-being of themselves and their loved ones. Their willingness to endure these risks became a powerful force shaping the course of the case. In this crucible of fear and defiance, the community watched closely. The outcome of the trial held significance beyond Marcus Taylor's fate. It represented a test of the justice system's capacity to protect those who dare to speak out. The witness's courage in the face of threats served as a reminder that while intimidation could cast a long shadow, it could not silence the pursuit of truth entirely. The investigation into Marcus Taylor's campaign of witness intimidation unfolded as a meticulous and exhaustive operation, one that demanded coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies and the painstaking collection of evidence. Behind the scenes, detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the web of threats that sought to undermine the pursuit of justice, transforming what had begun as scattered reports into a coherent and compelling case. The initial breakthrough came when several witnesses, emboldened by support from community advocates and law enforcement, agreed to cooperate by providing recorded evidence of threatening phone calls. Using call recording technology, some had captured chilling conversations where Marcus or his associates issued veiled warnings, their voices laced with menace and cold calculation. These recordings became a cornerstone of the investigation, providing direct audio proof of the intimidation efforts. Detectives then turned to digital forensics, tracing the origins of these calls. While Marcus and his team employed tactics such as burner phones and voice changers to obscure their identities, persistent investigative work uncovered patterns linking the calls back to numbers associated with individuals in Marcus's inner circle. This network of communication revealed a coordinated effort rather than random acts of menace. Simultaneously, surveillance operations played a critical role. Officers deployed discrete cameras near the homes and workplaces of key witnesses, capturing repeated visits by known associates of Marcus. These individuals were often observed loitering for extended periods or making brief but conspicuous appearances timed to coincide with important legal dates, such as court hearings or planned depositions. The visual evidence corroborated witness testimonies and demonstrated a pattern of intimidation designed to instill fear. One particularly significant find was footage of an individual delivering an anonymous package to a witness's home. A package later identified as containing a single bullet alongside a threatening note. Although direct links to Marcus remained elusive, investigators considered this act emblematic of the broader atmosphere of coercion that surrounded the case. Detectives also conducted extensive interviews, not only with the witnesses, but with members of Marcus's community. These conversations revealed a culture of silence and fear, where many were reluctant to speak openly due to concerns about retaliation. Yet, some insiders provided crucial information, shedding light on the methods and motivations behind the intimidation campaign. Throughout the investigation, law enforcement faced significant challenges. The close-knit nature of the neighborhoods involved complicated efforts to gather evidence, as witnesses and suspects often lived in proximity, making anonymity difficult to maintain. Additionally, the pervasive distrust of police within these communities required officers to build rapport carefully, ensuring that those affected felt safe enough to come forward. To bolster witness protection, authorities implemented a range of security measures. Some witnesses were provided with secure phones and emergency contact protocols, while others received physical escorts to and from court appearances. In certain instances, relocation assistance was offered, though limited resources constrained the scope of such programs. The investigative team also liaised with prosecutors to ensure that the evidence collected would withstand scrutiny during trial. Every recording, surveillance video, and witness statement was cataloged meticulously, building a comprehensive case file designed to demonstrate the premeditated nature of Marcus's intimidation efforts. One of the more complex aspects of the investigation involved unraveling the roles of Marcus's associates. While Marcus was the focal point, the network of individuals executing the intimidation tactics included friends, family members, and hired enforcers. Identifying and linking these actors to specific threatening actions required careful analysis of communication patterns, financial transactions, and behavioral observations. The investigation revealed a hierarchy within Marcus's circle, with orders and strategies flowing down from him to trusted lieutenants, who then carried out the intimidation. This structure underscored the deliberate and organized quality of the campaign, countering any defense claims that the threats were spontaneous or isolated. In addition to traditional investigative methods, authorities employed undercover operations aimed at intercepting plans to intimidate witnesses further. These efforts occasionally intercepted communications that revealed intentions to escalate threats or retaliate against those cooperating with law enforcement. Such intelligence was crucial in preempting potential harm and reinforcing protective measures. The cumulative weight of the evidence gathered created a compelling narrative of calculated interference with the judicial process. Prosecutors emphasized that the investigation demonstrated not only Marcus's involvement, but also his active orchestration of a systematic campaign to silence witnesses through fear and coercion. Throughout the process, the investigative team maintained a delicate balance, pursuing leads aggressively while respecting the confidentiality and safety of those involved. This approach was vital in maintaining trust and ensuring the continued cooperation of witnesses, whose testimonies were essential to securing a conviction. The unfolding investigation also illuminated broader issues within the justice system's capacity to handle cases involving witness intimidation. Resource limitations, community distrust, and the complexities of protecting vulnerable individuals highlighted systemic challenges that extended beyond Marcus Taylor's case. Law enforcement officials advocated for enhanced funding, specialized training, and improved interagency collaboration to address these persistent difficulties. As the day of trial approached, the extensive evidence collected during the investigation formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. The recordings, surveillance footage, and detailed witness statements painted a vivid picture of a defendant who had gone to great lengths to undermine the pursuit of justice. This body of work underscored the seriousness with which the court viewed witness intimidation and the commitment to holding perpetrators accountable. Meanwhile, the defense scrutinized the investigation, seeking to identify weaknesses or inconsistencies that could cast doubt on the evidence. They challenged the reliability of recordings, questioned the interpretation of surveillance footage, and argued that some witness statements were influenced by fear or misunderstanding. Nonetheless, the thoroughness of the investigative work posed a formidable obstacle. The story behind the investigation was one of persistence and dedication. An intricate endeavor combining technology, human intelligence, and community cooperation. Detectives and prosecutors alike recognized the high stakes involved. Understanding that successful prosecution of witness intimidation was critical not only for Marcus Taylor's case, but for reinforcing the integrity of the entire legal system. Beyond the courtroom, the investigation's findings reverberated through the community. They served as a stark reminder of the dangers faced by those who stand against violence and coercion, as well as the ongoing need for vigilance and support. The case became a catalyst for discussions on improving witness protection programs and addressing the root causes that enable such intimidation to flourish. In the end, the investigation into Marcus Taylor's intimidation campaign was a testament to the complexities of modern law enforcement. It highlighted the challenges of uncovering hidden threats, protecting vulnerable individuals, and building a case capable of withstanding legal scrutiny. This intricate process laid the groundwork for the subsequent trial stages, where the evidence would be presented and tested before a jury tasked with delivering justice. As the weight of the evidence against Marcus Taylor mounted, the legal proceedings took on a heightened intensity. with charges expanding to encompass not only the original allegations of armed robbery and assault, but also the serious accusations of witness intimidation. The courtroom became the arena where these intertwined cases would be argued, contested, and ultimately decided, drawing in a wide array of legal professionals, witnesses, and observers deeply invested in the outcome. The prosecution, led by an experienced team of attorneys well-versed in criminal law and witness protection statutes, moved swiftly to file additional charges related to intimidation. These new counts carried severe penalties, reflecting the gravity with which the judicial system regarded any attempt to interfere with the administration of justice. The legal documents detailed a litany of offenses, from making threats to witnesses, attempted coercion, to conspiracy in orchestrating these acts. From the outset, the prosecution's strategy was clear: to present a robust, evidence-backed case that demonstrated Marcus's deliberate and systematic efforts to silence those who would testify against him. They emphasized the premeditated nature of the intimidation campaign, underscoring how it was designed not only to protect Marcus's freedom, but to send a chilling message to the community at large. At the same time, the defense team prepared to mount a vigorous challenge. Led by a seasoned public defender known for advocating on behalf of clients with complex backgrounds, the defense framed Marcus's actions within the broader context of his life circumstances. They argued that while some interactions may have been misinterpreted, the charges of intimidation were exaggerated and lacked sufficient proof of intent. Central to the defense's approach was an appeal to the jury's understanding of Marcus's troubled history. A narrative emphasizing systemic failures, socioeconomic hardships, and psychological stressors. They sought to humanize their client, portraying him as a product of his environment rather than a calculated criminal mastermind. This strategy aimed to introduce reasonable doubt regarding the prosecution's assertions of deliberate intimidation. The legal battle also highlighted procedural complexities. The addition of witness intimidation charges required careful navigation of evidentiary rules, particularly concerning the admissibility of recorded calls, surveillance footage, and testimonies from those who had faced threats. Both sides engaged in pre-trial motions to exclude or admit various pieces of evidence, setting the stage for contentious courtroom debates. One significant aspect of the proceedings involved motions concerning the protection of witnesses. The prosecution requested measures such as anonymous testimony and in-camera sessions to shield vulnerable individuals from further intimidation. The defense, while acknowledging the need for safety, raised concerns about the potential impact on Marcus's right to confront his accusers, spotlighting the delicate balance between witness protection and fair trial rights. As the trial date approached, the court scheduled a series of hearings to address these procedural matters. Judges carefully weighed the competing interests, ultimately implementing a framework designed to safeguard witnesses while ensuring transparency and fairness in the proceedings. This included the use of secure video links for some testimonies and strict confidentiality agreements for those involved in the witness protection program. Throughout the pre-trial phase, both prosecution and defense prepared their witness lists, anticipating the critical testimonies that would shape the jury's understanding. The prosecution planned to call multiple witnesses who had experienced intimidation firsthand, supported by law enforcement officers and forensic experts who would explain the technical aspects of the evidence collected. Conversely, the defense sought to challenge the credibility of these witnesses, highlighting inconsistencies in their accounts and suggesting possible motives to fabricate or exaggerate claims. They also intended to bring forward character witnesses who would attest to Marcus's efforts to reform and the challenges he faced reintegrating into society. The courtroom atmosphere during these preparatory stages was charged with anticipation. Legal analysts and community members followed developments closely, aware that the case touched on fundamental issues of justice, public safety, and the rule of law. Media coverage intensified, with reporters scrutinizing every motion and hearing, framing the trial as a significant test of the system's ability to address witness intimidation effectively. Behind closed doors, legal teams engaged in rigorous strategy sessions. Prosecutors meticulously reviewed evidence to build a coherent narrative linking Marcus to the intimidation efforts, while defense attorneys crafted cross-examination plans aimed at undermining the prosecution's case. Both sides recognized that the trial's outcome would hinge not only on factual proof, but on the persuasive power of their presentations to the jury. The addition of the intimidation charges also affected sentencing considerations. Prosecutors signaled their intent to seek enhanced penalties, citing statutory provisions that impose harsher sentences for crimes that threaten the integrity of the judicial process. Defense counsel, meanwhile, prepared to argue for leniency, emphasizing mitigating factors and Marcus's personal circumstances. Throughout this period, the court maintained a firm stance against any attempts to disrupt proceedings. Security measures were heightened within the courthouse, with increased presence of law enforcement personnel to prevent further intimidation attempts. The message was clear. The legal system would not tolerate interference and was committed to upholding the safety of all participants. As opening statements were scheduled, both prosecution and defense refined their themes. The prosecution planned to portray Marcus as a man who had willfully embarked on a campaign to intimidate and silence witnesses, undermining justice itself. The defense intended to contest this portrayal, framing the charges as part of a broader struggle faced by an individual striving to overcome a difficult past. The courtroom was set to become the stage for a complex legal drama, one that would explore not just the facts of the case, but the broader societal issues it embodied. The added charges of witness intimidation elevated the stakes, transforming the trial into a pivotal moment in the fight against efforts to subvert justice through fear. As the day of the trial drew near, all eyes turned to the proceedings, which promised to test the resilience of the legal system and the courage of those willing to stand against intimidation. Marcus Taylor's fate, and the message sent about the consequences of such crimes, hung in the balance, poised to be decided through the adversarial process that lies at the heart of American justice. The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial, the air thick with anticipation as Marcus Taylor's case moved from pre-trial motions into the crucible of witness testimonies. The proceedings promised to be a grueling examination of the chilling allegations of witness intimidation layered atop the original criminal charges. For the witnesses who had been targeted, stepping onto the stand was both a moment of reckoning and a test of extraordinary courage. The prosecution opened with a powerful narrative, setting the tone for what would be a detailed and emotionally charged presentation of evidence. The lead prosecutor framed the case as a battle not only against Marcus's alleged criminal acts, but against the very tactics he employed to undermine justice. This case is about more than one man, the prosecutor declared. It is about the fundamental right of every citizen to speak truth without fear. The first witnesses called were those who had directly encountered Marcus's intimidation efforts. Angela Martinez, the young mother whose testimony had been pivotal from the outset, was among the earliest to take the stand. Despite visible nerves, she recounted the sequence of events with clarity. The threatening phone calls, the ominous presence near her home, and the relentless anxiety that followed. Her voice trembled at times, but her resolve never wavered. Following Angela, several other witnesses shared their experiences. A local shop owner described how he had been followed and warned to keep silent, detailing how the intimidation extended beyond words to subtle but pervasive acts of surveillance. A neighbor testified about the disturbing package containing a bullet, conveying the fear that gripped the community. Each testimony painted a vivid picture of a defendant who had employed a calculated campaign to silence those who sought justice. Throughout the testimonies, the courtroom was punctuated by moments of tension. Some witnesses broke down, overwhelmed by the weight of reliving their ordeals. Others maintained a steely composure, their statements a testament to resilience in the face of fear. The prosecution's careful questioning aimed to elicit not only factual details, but the emotional impact of the intimidation, underscoring the human cost of Marcus's alleged actions. Law enforcement officers also took the stand, providing expert testimony on the investigation's findings. Detectives detailed the methods used to gather evidence, from recording threatening calls to analyzing surveillance footage, explaining how these pieces fit together into a coherent narrative of intimidation. Their testimony reinforced the credibility of the witnesses and the thoroughness of the investigation. Forensic experts contributed insights into the technical aspects of the evidence, describing voice analysis that matched threatening calls to Marcus or his associates and explaining the procedures that authenticated surveillance recordings. These experts helped the jury understand the sophistication of the evidence and the lengths to which Marcus allegedly went to conceal his involvement. The defense, meanwhile, sought to challenge the witnesses' credibility and the prosecution's narrative. Cross-examinations were rigorous, aiming to expose inconsistencies or exaggerations in testimonies. Defense attorneys questioned the circumstances of the threats, suggesting that some incidents were coincidental or misinterpreted. They probed witnesses' motivations, implying that fear could have influenced their perceptions. Despite these efforts, the prosecution's witnesses largely held their ground. The consistency of their accounts, coupled with the supporting physical evidence, created a formidable challenge to the defense's attempts to sow doubt. The jury was presented with a tapestry of personal stories intertwined with objective proof, making the case's emotional and factual dimensions inseparable. One notable moment came when a witness described the psychological toll of living under constant threat. She spoke candidly about the isolation, anxiety, and fear that had permeated her life, emphasizing how the intimidation extended beyond individual acts to create a climate of terror. This testimony resonated deeply, humanizing the abstract concept of witness intimidation and highlighting its profound societal implications. Expert witnesses specializing in the psychology of intimidation and trauma further illuminated the case. They explained how threats and coercion function to suppress testimony, eroding confidence and inducing silence. Their insights helped the jury appreciate the complex dynamics at play, reinforcing the prosecution's argument that Marcus's actions were part of a strategic campaign rather than isolated incidents. The defense countered with their own expert testimony, attempting to contextualize the witnesses' fears within broader psychological frameworks that could introduce doubt about the reliability of their statements. However, these efforts were met with skepticism, as the prosecution's evidence and witness credibility remained strong. Throughout the trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom was charged with emotion and gravity. The testimonies brought to life the stark reality of witness intimidation, a crime that operates in the shadows but leaves deep scars. Jurors were confronted not only with facts, but with the lived experiences of individuals who had risked everything to stand up against fear. The prosecution's case was a carefully constructed mosaic of personal courage, investigative rigor, and legal precision. Each witness added a vital piece, collectively demonstrating the deliberate and systematic nature of Marcus Taylor's intimidation campaign. Their voices, once silenced by fear, now echoed powerfully within the halls of justice. As the trial progressed, the courtroom became a stage where the battle between truth and intimidation played out in full view. Witnesses' bravery in testifying, despite ongoing risks, underscored the high stakes involved. Their testimonies challenged the notion that fear could prevail, embodying the principle that justice depends on the willingness of individuals to speak out. The proceedings also highlighted the critical role of the justice system in protecting those who come forward. The court's implementation of security measures and witness protections was a tangible acknowledgement of the challenges faced by individuals targeted by intimidation. These efforts aimed to ensure that the pursuit of truth could proceed without further harm. Outside the courtroom, the testimonies sparked conversations about the broader implications of witness intimidation. Community members, legal experts, and advocates reflected on the courage displayed and the systemic issues revealed. The case became a focal point for discussions on enhancing protections and addressing the root causes that enable such crimes. For Marcus Taylor, the witness testimonies represented a formidable obstacle. The personal accounts, supported by expert analysis and physical evidence, painted a comprehensive portrait of a defendant who had allegedly sought to manipulate the justice system through fear. The defense faced the daunting task of countering this narrative and convincing the jury of reasonable doubt. As the trial continued, the weight of the witnesses' stories remained central to the unfolding drama. Their willingness to confront intimidation head-on not only shaped the case against Marcus, but also reaffirmed a fundamental tenet of justice. The truth must be heard, even in the face of fear. As the trial neared its conclusion, the courtroom became a crucible of competing narratives, each side presenting its closing arguments with the intent of swaying the jury's verdict on the complex charges against Marcus Taylor. The prosecution and defense faced the daunting task of distilling weeks of testimony, evidence, and expert analysis into compelling final statements that would shape how the jury understood the case's gravity and implications. The prosecution's closing argument was a forceful reaffirmation of the deliberate and systematic nature of Marcus's witness intimidation campaign. The lead prosecutor stood before the jury, locking eyes with each member, underscoring the premeditated tactics that had sought to silence the voices of truth. This was not a moment of panic or impulsivity, the prosecutor asserted. It was a calculated effort to corrupt the justice process itself, to protect a man who feared accountability more than the law. Drawing upon the consistent testimonies of the witnesses, the prosecutor emphasized the pattern of threats, coercion, and psychological warfare that had permeated the case. The recorded calls, surveillance footage, and first-hand accounts formed an irrefutable mosaic demonstrating Marcus's intent to intimidate. Each call, each visit, each silent message was a brick laid in the wall of fear he tried to build around himself. The prosecutor said, voice steady and resolute. The emotional weight of the witness's courage was also a key theme. The prosecutor reminded the jury that these individuals had faced threats not only against themselves, but against their families and communities. Their bravery in coming forward was not just a legal matter, but a moral one. A battle for the integrity of the system and the safety of their neighborhoods. By standing up, they challenged the very darkness Marcus tried to impose. The prosecutor concluded, urging the jury to hold him accountable. In contrast, the defense's closing argument sought to humanize Marcus, painting a picture of a man shaped by adversity and systemic failure, rather than a cold-hearted orchestrator of intimidation. The defense attorney addressed the jury with a measured tone, acknowledging the seriousness of the charges, but urging consideration of the broader context. Marcus Taylor is not a villain in a vacuum, the attorney argued. He is a product of circumstances, poverty, trauma, and a lifetime of struggle, factors that must inform your judgment. The defense challenged the prosecution's portrayal of the intimidation as a calculated conspiracy, contending that many of the alleged threats were either misinterpreted or coincidental. They highlighted inconsistencies in witness testimonies and suggested that fear and stress might have amplified perceptions. Reasonable doubt exists, the defense attorney insisted. The evidence does not conclusively prove that Marcus intended to silence witnesses through intimidation. Furthermore, the defense appealed to the jury's sense of fairness and compassion, urging leniency and understanding. They argued that Marcus had made efforts toward rehabilitation and that harsh sentencing would do little to break the cycles that had entrapped him. Justice is not only about punishment, the defense concluded. It is about recognizing humanity and the potential for change. As the courtroom absorbed the competing arguments, the judge provided the jury with detailed instructions on their duties and the legal standards they must apply. The jurors were reminded to weigh the evidence carefully, assess witness credibility, and consider the intent behind Marcus's actions. They were cautioned against allowing emotion or bias to cloud their judgment, emphasizing the solemn responsibility entrusted to them. Once the jury retired to deliberate, the atmosphere in the courthouse shifted into a tense silence, punctuated only by the occasional murmur among observers and legal teams. The deliberation process was expected to be thorough, given the complexity of the charges and the volume of evidence presented. Inside the jury room, members grappled with the challenging task before them. The case demanded careful consideration of not just whether Marcus had committed the original crimes, but whether he had knowingly and deliberately engaged in witness intimidation. Discussions were intense, reflecting the weight of the decision and its implications for justice and community safety. Some jurors expressed deep concern over the evidence of intimidation, acknowledging the bravery of the witnesses and the seriousness of the threats they faced. Others wrestled with the defense's arguments about reasonable doubt and the socioeconomic factors influencing Marcus's behavior. The deliberations revealed a jury engaged in a nuanced evaluation rather than a simplistic verdict. Throughout their discussions, the jurors revisited the recorded calls, testimonies, and expert analyses, seeking clarity and consensus. They debated the credibility of witnesses, the interpretation of evidence, and the extent to which Marcus's actions constituted a coordinated campaign versus isolated incidents. The jury's deliberation process stretched over several days, reflecting the complexity and gravity of the case. Meanwhile, the legal teams prepared for all possible outcomes, aware that the verdict would set a precedent regarding how the justice system addresses witness intimidation. Outside the courthouse, community members, victims' advocates, and legal observers awaited the jury's decision with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The case had become a focal point for broader discussions on justice, safety, and the rule of law, with many seeing the verdict as a test of society's commitment to protecting those who speak out. As the jury finally reached a verdict, the courtroom reconvened, the air thick with anticipation. The four-person stood, delivering the decision that would reverberate beyond the immediate case. A determination on whether Marcus Taylor's actions constituted deliberate witness intimidation, alongside the original criminal charges. The verdict held profound significance, not only for Marcus and the individuals involved, but for the message it sent about the justice system's resolve to confront threats to its integrity. The outcome would influence future cases, shape community trust, and underscore the ongoing struggle to protect truth from the shadows of fear. In this pivotal moment, the layers of evidence, testimony, and legal argumentation converged, culminating in a verdict that reflected the jury's interpretation of the complex interplay between individual accountability and broader societal challenges. The case of Marcus Taylor stood as a stark reminder of the delicate balance between justice, fear, and the enduring quest for truth. On a gray morning that mirrored the weight of the moment, Marcus Taylor returned to the courtroom to hear the verdict that would define his fate and send ripples through the community. After weeks of testimony, arguments, and deliberations, the jury's decision was finally ready. A verdict that would not only address the original criminal charges, but also the deeply troubling accusations of witness intimidation that had cast a shadow over the entire case. As the courtroom filled with a tense hush, the jury foreperson rose to announce their findings. The charges of witness intimidation, the prosecution's core focus in the latter half of the trial, were met with a unanimous verdict of guilt. The jurors concluded that Marcus had deliberately and systematically engaged in a campaign to silence those who sought justice, employing threats, coercion, and psychological tactics to undermine the legal process. The courtroom reacted with a mixture of solemnity and relief. For the witnesses who had bravely come forward despite the risks, the verdict was a validation of their courage and a testament to the justice system's capacity to hold perpetrators accountable. For Marcus and his defense team, the decision marked a significant setback, compounding the gravity of the original charges he faced. Following the announcement on the intimidation counts, the jury proceeded to deliver verdicts on the underlying criminal allegations. Marcus was found guilty on multiple counts related to armed robbery and assault, cementing a pattern of violent behavior alongside his efforts to obstruct justice. The combined verdicts painted a comprehensive picture of a man whose actions had inflicted harm not only through direct violence, but also through the insidious weaponization of fear. The judge, presiding over the proceedings with a measured demeanor, acknowledged the seriousness of the verdicts and the implications for sentencing. He reminded all present of the court's duty to impose penalties that reflected both the severity of the crimes and the need to uphold the integrity of the justice system. The deliberate intimidation of witnesses strikes at the very heart of our legal process, the judge remarked. It cannot be tolerated. In the days that followed, the sentencing hearing became a focal point for the community, media, and legal observers. Prosecutors advocated for a substantial sentence that would serve both as punishment and deterrent, emphasizing the need to send a clear message that witness intimidation would be met with the full force of the law. They highlighted the chilling effects such actions have on the justice system and public safety. The defense, while acknowledging the verdicts, renewed their calls for leniency, citing Marcus's troubled background and the potential for rehabilitation. They urged the court to consider mitigating factors, including his expressed remorse and the systemic challenges that had influenced his life trajectory. The defense framed sentencing as an opportunity for redemption rather than solely retribution. After careful consideration, the judge imposed a sentence that reflected the compounded nature of Marcus's offenses. For the witness intimidation charges, he received an additional 30 years in prison, to be served consecutively with the sentences for armed robbery and assault. The sentence underscored the court's resolve to deter similar conduct and protect the sanctity of the legal process. Marcus's reaction to the sentence was subdued. Surrounded by his legal team, he maintained a stoic expression, though the weight of the decision was unmistakable. For the victims and witnesses, the sentence represented a measure of justice, a recognition of the risks they had endured, and a safeguard against future intimidation. The sentencing reverberated beyond the courtroom walls, sparking broader discussions about the role of witness protection in the criminal justice system. Advocates seized the moment to call for enhanced measures to safeguard those who come forward, emphasizing that the integrity of trials depends on the willingness of witnesses to testify without fear. Law enforcement officials echoed these sentiments, highlighting the challenges faced in cases like Marcus's. where intimidation tactics complicate investigations and threaten community trust. The case became a catalyst for dialogues on improving resources, training, and interagency collaboration to better protect vulnerable witnesses. Public reaction was mixed, but largely supportive of the court's firm stance. Community leaders praised the sentence as a necessary step toward breaking cycles of violence and fear. At the same time, some commentators raised questions about the broader social issues that contribute to such cases, including poverty, education, and systemic inequities, advocating for comprehensive approaches that address root causes alongside punitive measures. Within the criminal justice community, Marcus Taylor's case emerged as a cautionary tale, a stark example of the lengths to which some defendants will go to evade accountability and the critical importance of robust witness protection protocols. The case was studied in legal forums and training sessions, informing best practices and policies aimed at combating intimidation. For the witnesses themselves, the verdict and sentencing offered a complex mix of closure and ongoing concern. While justice had been served, the personal toll of the experience lingered. Many continued to grapple with the emotional aftermath, underscoring the need for sustained support and resources beyond the courtroom. Marcus's extended sentence also sparked debate about the balance between punishment and rehabilitation. Some voices within the community and legal circles questioned whether long incarcerations effectively address the underlying issues that lead to criminal behavior and intimidation, advocating for integrated approaches that include education, mental health services, and community engagement. Nonetheless, the immediate impact of the sentence was clear: a strong deterrent against witness intimidation and a reaffirmation of the justice system's commitment to protecting those who speak out. It sent a message to defendants and communities alike that attempts to obstruct justice through fear would be met with severe consequences. As Marcus began serving his sentence, the ripple effects of the case continued to influence the legal landscape. The prosecution's success in securing convictions on witness intimidation charges reinforced the importance of vigilance and proactive measures in safeguarding trials. Legislative bodies and judicial authorities examined the case to identify opportunities for reform and enhancement of witness protection frameworks. In the years following, Marcus Taylor's case became a reference point in discussions about juvenile justice, offender rehabilitation, and community safety. Its lessons informed policies aimed at preventing intimidation and supporting witnesses, contributing to a more resilient justice system. For the families, victims, and community members affected, the case was a somber chapter, one marked by pain, but also by the affirmation that justice, though sometimes delayed, could prevail. The sentencing of Marcus Taylor stood as a testament to the enduring struggle to uphold the rule of law in the face of intimidation and fear. In the years that followed Marcus Taylor's conviction and sentencing, the case continued to resonate far beyond the walls of the courtroom, sparking critical reflection and prompting tangible changes within the criminal justice system. It became a pivotal example in the ongoing struggle to protect witnesses, uphold the integrity of trials, and address the complex social factors that contribute to cycles of crime and intimidation. One of the most significant outcomes was a renewed legislative focus on strengthening witness protection laws. Lawmakers, influenced by the high-profile nature of Marcus's intimidation campaign, enacted reforms aimed at providing more robust safeguards for those who come forward in criminal cases. These reforms included increased funding for witness security programs, expanded options for anonymous testimony, and enhanced coordination between law enforcement agencies to monitor and respond to threats more effectively. These legislative changes were not merely symbolic. They translated into practical improvements on the ground. Police departments received additional resources to establish specialized units dedicated to investigating and preventing witness intimidation. Training programs were developed to equip officers, prosecutors, and court personnel with the tools necessary to recognize and address intimidation tactics swiftly and sensitively. Community organizations also saw an infusion of support, enabling them to expand their roles in providing emotional and logistical assistance to witnesses and victims. This included counseling services, relocation assistance, and advocacy efforts designed to empower individuals navigating the daunting legal process. The collaborative approach between legal authorities and community groups became a model for holistic support. The case of Marcus Taylor was frequently cited in academic and professional forums as a case study highlighting the multifaceted challenges of witness intimidation. Legal scholars examined the implications for due process, balancing defendants' rights with the need to protect witnesses. Psychologists and social workers contributed insights into the trauma experienced by those targeted, advocating for integrated services that addressed both legal and mental health needs. Within the justice system, Marcus's case prompted internal reviews and policy adjustments. Prosecutors adopted more proactive strategies for identifying potential intimidation early in investigations, while courts implemented stricter protocols to ensure the safety and anonymity of witnesses when necessary. Judges became more vigilant in monitoring courtroom security and enforcing sanctions against any attempts to disrupt proceedings. The ripple effects extended into the realm of public awareness as well. Media coverage of the case and subsequent reforms raised community consciousness about the critical role witnesses play in the pursuit of justice. Educational campaigns emphasized the importance of standing against intimidation and fostering environments where truth could be spoken without fear. Marcus Taylor himself became a symbol in discussions about the broader societal issues intertwined with criminal behavior and intimidation. His background, marked by poverty, trauma, and limited opportunities, was often referenced to underscore the need for comprehensive approaches that combined accountability with rehabilitation and social support. Advocates argued that addressing these root causes was essential to breaking the cycles that lead to both crime and the silencing of witnesses. As the criminal justice community grappled with these complexities, Marcus's case informed ongoing debates about sentencing, juvenile justice, and the balance between punishment and rehabilitation. It highlighted the challenges of dealing with offenders who use intimidation as a tool and the necessity of strategies that could both deter such conduct and promote positive change. For survivors and witnesses involved in the case, the years since the trial brought a mixture of reflection and resilience. Many continued to advocate for stronger protections and support systems, drawing on their experiences to inform policy and community efforts. Their voices contributed to a growing movement aimed at ensuring that no one faced the fear of retaliation alone. In the neighborhoods affected by Marcus's actions, the case remained a touchstone, a reminder of both the dangers posed by intimidation and the power of collective courage. Community leaders worked to foster trust between residents and law enforcement, recognizing that collaboration was key to preventing future cycles of fear and silence. Within the correctional system, Marcus's incarceration sparked discussions about the rehabilitation of offenders convicted of intimidation and violent crimes. Programs focusing on education, mental health, and conflict resolution sought to address the underlying issues that contributed to his behavior, reflecting a broader shift toward integrated approaches within prisons. As of the latest reports, Marcus Taylor remains incarcerated, serving his sentence with limited public communication. Periodic reviews of his case have been used to assess the effectiveness of rehabilitation efforts and to inform ongoing policy development related to offender management and recidivism prevention. The legacy of Marcus Taylor's case continues to influence the criminal justice landscape, serving as a cautionary tale and a catalyst for reform. It underscores the delicate balance between protecting individual rights and maintaining the collective safety and integrity of the legal system. The case remains a powerful example of the challenges posed by witness intimidation and the enduring efforts required to ensure that justice prevails. In reflecting on the journey from initial charges to conviction and beyond, the story of Marcus Taylor resonates as a complex narrative about fear, courage, accountability, and systemic change. It highlights the vital importance of safeguarding those who step forward and the ongoing commitment needed from all sectors of society to uphold the principles of justice. The impact of the case serves as a lasting reminder that while intimidation can cast long shadows, it cannot extinguish the light of truth forever. Through legislative reform, community engagement, and unwavering resolve, the pursuit of justice continues, inspired in no small part by the voices that refuse to be silenced in the face of fear.